curtain jerk, face, getting color, kayfabe, mark, smark, swerve. If you've been watching any of our shows for the last few weeks and you've been a little confused about the language that we've been using, then you're going to want to stay tuned. This show's for you. This time on Wrestling with the Business, Falls Count Anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, welcome back to the more intimate version of the Wrestling with the Business podcast. I am the varsity athlete, Jeremy Bodette, sitting here with Matthew, More Than Man, and the Professor, Lambert. We're coming to you live, or rather, was live, in the Insane Games studios. And I got a couple questions from fans of the show that were basically like, what the heck are you guys talking about? You're using a lot of language that I don't recognize. A lot of interest in the moves, which we are going to cover in a future episode, the styles of matches. But the biggest thing I got was, I'm trying to follow along with you guys, but it's a gaming channel. I play a lot of games, but I don't watch a lot of wrestling. I watch a little bit of it, and I don't know a lot of the industry terms. So what I did to try and have a little fun with it is I put together a list of 35 terms. This is by no means exhaustive. There are hundreds and hundreds of different, what do I want to say, slang terms, for lack of a better way of putting it, that the industry uses to kind of communicate different ideas and things. And I thought we'd put our resident smart guy, our resident professor, to the test. Some of them are going to be easy. Hopefully a couple of them aren't quite so easy. And we'll learn a heck of a lot more about the industry while we do it. So without further ado, because we do have a lot to get through, you ready to go, Matt?
Hang on. All right, let's do it.
That should be a beer, but it's not.
Don't tell them that.
So
brother.
I'm gonna start. We'll get to that. I'm gonna start by giving you the term, and I'll share any alternatives that might exist after the fact, but I'm only giving you one term, and I want you to tell me what it is. Okay?
Okay.
All right. To make it easy, we'll keep these mostly in alphabetical order, but I will group similar terms together. All right, first term.
And I have not heard this list before this.
No. All
right,
first
is
term
legit.
Is angle. What is an angle?
An angle would be a storyline or a portion of a storyline that's being told in the ring.
Exactly, yes. It's a fictional storyline. Typically, it begins with one wrestler sort of attacking another, or basically there has to be some action to start the process. It can be as small as a singles match, or it could be a long-term rivalry or vendetta that goes on and on and on.
Attack in the back.
But, I mean, it could go on for years and years. Like, it could just be a singles match, one and done, like a lot of the stuff with WWE is today. I'm thinking of Karrion Kross, where every week he seems to have a new opponent.
Jeez.
Or it can drag on for forever and take years and years and years to get through it. So, and sometimes things can get a little bit confusing when wrestlers get fired or get injured, and there's an angle that's running right now. So basically, when you hear angle, just think storyline.
Yep.
Storyline. All right, next one. Getting color.
Getting color. The crimson mask, when somebody starts bleeding in the ring in a match.
Yes. And there is one interesting little tidbit to it, is it has to be intentional.
Intentional color.
So it's also known as juicing, blading.
Gigging.
Any one of those. So you have to intentionally cut yourself, or sometimes you can even allow yourself to get cut by your opponent or by somebody else, but it's the act of intentionally doing it in an attempt to make the other person look really good and to sort of sell.
Get some sympathy from the crowd.
Yeah, get some sympathy, or just kind of add some violence.
Matches are always more interesting when there's a little bit of blood.
Yeah, so they call that getting color. That's what we call it. Or blading, sometimes, most commonly. All right, related to that one, hard way.
Now, this is when you get color unintentionally.
Yes.
Or by a move going wrong, or even, I don't know, that's what I immediately thought. Would somebody throwing an elbow on purpose to give you color, is that considered hard way?
Yeah.
But anyway, it's getting blood
Yes.
unintentionally.
Basically, it's anytime you get blood via any other means that isn't bleeding.
Right.
So yeah, it's doing it the hard way.
It's the one that always comes to mind is Brock Lesnar versus Randy Orton some years ago when he starts elbowing Orton in the head, and Orton just starts gushing.
Yeah, one term that I don't have on here, but that is related to this is potato, right? Which is when you just haul off and you just potato the guy in the head. You just basically punch him for real.
Yep.
So that's one. So yeah, so whenever we talk about somebody getting color the hard way, which is what Brock Lesnar did
At Backlash.
at Backlash, it's what Bobby Lashley did a couple of weeks ago on SmackDown. It's anytime you actually get hit and you actually bleed as a result of it. All right, botched spot.
Oof. Botched spot is a wrestling move or a wrestling sequence that goes wrong.
Yeah, it goes wrong. It's mistimed, and it tends to kind of take you out of the story because it tends to
Very noticeable.
and it kind of exposes the fact that it's the depiction of combat and not actual combat. Also known as blown spot, misselling, misspot. So all these terms are kind of, I use botched more than anything else, which is kind of why I use that particular term. But yeah, it's anytime you're watching a wrestling match and you see somebody swing, clearly miss the other person, but they still act like they got hit, that would be a missell kind of a thing. So anything that pulls you out of the story like that. All right, here's an easy one. Bump.
A bump. Anytime you fall on the mat, on the ring.
Yeah, anytime you fall down on the mat, you can do it flat back, where you basically just land. That's kind of most of the bumps you see are flat back. You can do front bumps, right? Oftentimes frog splashes are kind of front bumps that you see, but lots of times guys will sell clotheslines by doing backflips and landing on their stomach and that kind of thing. But anytime you literally bump up against the mat, it's called a bump. And I have read a couple different articles that indicate that taking a bump in a WWE ring is the equivalent of getting hit by a car at 12 miles an hour.
Did not know
So you
that.
think about how many times guys take bumps
Yeah.
in a show, in a week, in a month, in a year. It's not surprising that they get injured like they do. All right, cheap heat.
Cheap heat.
Well, hang on, let's do heat, and then
Heat-
we'll talk about what cheap heat is.
Right. Heat is any time a wrestler can get the crowd to boo them. Especially, obviously, heels want heat. They want to get booed. That's what makes the story interesting. Cheap heat is when you are in a certain town and you badmouth their sports team. It's just low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. Anytime you have to bring up, cheap heat is anytime you have to bring up something outside of the wrestling business. If you're in Buffalo and you talk about how the Bills suck, that's cheap heat. If you talk about, all the knuckle draggers in Detroit, right?
Your old hometown.
That's cheap heat. You mock a local sports team, or you do whatever you have to do. Or even if you're a foreign wrestler, like Iron Sheik used to do that all the time.
Yep.
He was talking about how much America sucked, right? That's cheap heat. It's just a really easy way to kind of get over. All right, well then let's talk about the flip side of that. What's a cheap pop?
Well,
what's a pop, and then what's a cheap pop?
A pop is the opposite of heat. The good guys want to get a pop from the crowd where they cheer, where they howl, where they go insane. A cheap pop would be what Mick Foley used to always do right here in Saratoga Springs.
Beautiful Saratoga Springs, yeah. Or how about them Bills, you might say. Especially if they're coming off of a win streak or they just won the Super Bowl.
Pretty much any time you mention the name of the town you're in, that's cheap pop.
Yeah, it's kissing up. Mick Foley's famous for kissing up to the crowd, very cheap. And a pop is anytime you get a positive crowd response. So you'll hear us around the table, oh, well, that got a good pop or it got a decent pop. Really, we're just talking about a positive crowd response. And sometimes what they'll do is they'll pipe in sound to make it look like somebody's getting heat. So they'll put the sound of boos on, even though if you look in the crowd, nobody's booing. Or they'll put the sound of a pop in, even though you look in the crowd and nobody's cheering or clapping or anything. So, yeah, cheap heat, cheap pop, heat and pop. And really, at the end of the day, heat is really just tension. It's really just stretching that rubber band as far as you can, because there is a such thing called a hot tag. right? Where you build up a lot of tension if somebody's getting beat up and they're trying to tag their partner and they can't, and then finally they get to tag. That's a hot tag. So heat is really just tension, friction that's getting built up. All right, one more. Go away heat.
Go away heat. So there are times when a wrestler, if a good heel wrestler, good bad guy wrestler, gets good heat, you want to see that wrestler again because you want to see him get beat. But if you're getting go away heat, the fans don't want to see you at all. They want you gone. They want you off the TV screen. They want you out of the ring. They don't want to see you.
Yeah, it's usually like we don't even want you to perform.
Right.
Like it's not even because there is what we call nuclear heat in the business, which is like what Dominic Mysterio is getting now, where it's like they're so pissed off.
Top heel in the business.
Yeah, they're so pissed off. They'll scream so loud that you can't hear him over his microphone. That's nuclear heat. Go away heat is like we are so tired of you in general. I mean, I gotta think that
Baron Corbin was in that for a long time.
I mean, in my opinion, Trish Stratus has got go away.
Really?
I just don't want to see her on a screen anymore.
That's just you, though, man.
Just
A lot of people like her.
Go away. Go home. Take care of your kids. So yeah, go away heat is just not that you're good, not that you're bad. We're just tired of looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what's curtain jerk?
Curtain jerk, the first match on the show.
That's right. Literally like jerking the curtain on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, the curtain jerk you want to be your second best match of the night.
Yeah.
You don't want it to be
you want to get the crowd going hot right off the bat.
Yeah, you want to get them going good. Oftentimes, and sometimes, curtain jerks can steal the show. I mean, if things happen to not go well for the main event, or if there's an issue down the card.
For a while there, when WWE was doing matches on kickoff shows, some of the kickoff matches were better than the main show matches.
Yeah. I can say at this year's WrestleMania, the curtain jerks were not very good at all. But at most shows, you want it to be your second best match of the night. That's the idea. So whenever we talk about whoever jerked the curtain or blah, blah, blah was a curtain jerk or the curtain jerk match was, we're just talking about the first one of the night. All right, let's go really easy here. Babyface.
Babyface is the good guy.
Yes, the heroic one. Hulk Hogan's probably one of the most iconic faces. Cena, a guy that's so good people end up hating them in the end.
Cody Rhodes in AEW.
Eats their vegetables, follows the rules, is always on the side of truth, justice, and the American way.
Mm-hmm.
The good guy. Also called a Technico.
Technico, yep, in Mexico.
In Mexico. So sometimes called a face for short, baby face. All right, let's talk about and I brought this one up specifically. We haven't used it a lot, but we have specifically used it on our show, on our main show. What's a dusty finish?
Dusty finish. That is the finish to a match that makes no sense. That's usually some sort of disqualification or interference or just a random ass schmaz that just does not work for the crowd, for the fans, for anybody.
Yeah. It's named after Dusty Rhodes, the late father of Cody Rhodes and Dustin Rhodes, who are both still working in the business for different promotions. But yeah, basically it's any finish in which the face appears to win a big match, but then the decision gets reversed later. Maybe there's a technicality or some kind of interference takes over. In addition, it can kind of be an ambiguous finish, which is kind of why we talked about, Cody Rhodes, ironically, getting a dusty finish.
On
Lesnar.
Yep.
And it's named after Dusty Rhodes, who booked a lot of that kind of work when he was in NWA and WCW.
Yep.
So that's where that came from. And you're going to find that a lot of the terms that we use are sort of references or homages to classical wrestlers that kind of have become so popular that they're kind of part of the lore of wrestling. What is a faction?
Faction is a group of wrestlers that are together. The OC, the Bloodline, the Elite, those are all factions.
Exactly. So the idea is that they're there to kind of protect each other, that they're kind of there to support each other.
In New Japan, everybody is in a faction.
And I was going to say factions can get really large. They can get really big. All right.
NWO had at least 30 people at one point.
Let's really dig deep here. What is a stable? And how is it different from a faction?
Ooh, that's a good one.
This is the one I thought might get you.
This does get me. I always thought a stable and a faction were the same thing.
Stables are usually heels, as opposed to factions, who generally share common motives. One of the biggest differences is that stables have a leader or a spokesperson. So you would not call the OC a faction.
Really?
Yes, because 3 is the minimum. You have to have 3, and they clearly have a spokesperson. However, you might call Judgment Day a faction because they don't really have one spokesperson. They go up there, and any one of them can grab the mic, get heat, and talk. So, yeah, it's kind of an interesting one. They reference stables sometimes have several members partaking in separate activities, like Owen Hart and the British Bulldog doing their own tag team, and then having the Hart Foundation kind of there as the parent group. Another one referenced here is it's very common in Japanese promotions where the stables tend to be larger, like Bullet Club, Chaos, that kind of a thing.
Interesting.
A stable differs from a faction in that a stable consists of wrestlers who share a common leader as a manager or valet who directs the wrestlers and speaks for them. So, again, Bloodline, clearly a stable.
Yeah.
From that perspective.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting. All right. Let's do an easier one. Gimmick.
A gimmick is... what's the wording I want? So gimmick is a character or something that a wrestler does as part of their character, whether it's the way they talk, the way they move, something they carry with them, what they wear.
Right. A gimmick is when you hear gimmick, just think character, because that's really what it is. So a gimmick could be anything from the dress they have to the intonation of their voice. Obviously, Macho Man Randy Savage, Dusty Rhodes, they all had pretty iconic ways of talking. It could be a catchphrase, your jabroni, right, that catches on. It could be emotion. Hulk Hogan's famous, let me hear it. It could be a finishing move, Tombstone Pile Driver.
Yep.
Became very iconic and is associated, or 5-star frog splash, something, figure 4 leg lock, something that becomes iconic and associated with a very particular type of gimmick. But basically, when you hear gimmick, think persona, think character, and everything that goes into it. All right, let's do another homage, gorilla position.
The gorilla position, named after Gorilla Monsoon, one of the famous wrestlers and later commentators in WWE. The gorilla position is where the wrestlers wait to go out into the arena. When their music hits, they're standing waiting in the gorilla position.
Yeah, and typically that's
where the production is.
Right, a producer, whoever. So they say, oh, well, who was in... Vince McMahon was in gorilla position, which is basically our way of saying he was running the show. Because if you're producing the show, you are just off stage, off to the side, coordinating everything. Usually you got a headset on, you're sitting at a table just off to the side.
In other companies, it's usually known as the go position.
The go position, or in All Elite Wrestling, what do they call it?
I think they tried calling it the dusty position, didn't they?
They called it the dusty position.
I don't
for
think
a
that
little
stuck,
while.
though.
It definitely did not. And in WCW, let's dig real deep. What did they call it?
I thought it was just the go position.
The Jody. The
the
Jody position.
Yes, that's right.
Jody Hamilton.
Hamilton. Yep.
That's what they called it. So, yeah. So basically, it's just an area just off stage. So again, he came back to gorilla position just means he went off.
The crowd couldn't see him anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Green.
Green is new. Somebody is green is a new wrestler, not very experienced.
Yeah, brand new, early stages of their career, and oftentimes is referred to in a negative connotation. They're prone to making mistakes. They don't really know what they're doing. They're kind of new. They're green. Heel.
Heel's the bad guy.
Yeah, he's a villain, and he is booked specifically to piss you off as a fan. The opposite of a face.
He's the guy everyone pays to want to see lose.
They tend to try to get a lot of heat. Sometimes they end up getting cheap heat, and they're the guys that are always breaking the rules, gouging eyes, pushing referees. The big one that you see now is they're distracting the referee while the heels team is allowed to cheat and get away with it, kind of a thing. You see a lot of using the ropes for leverage, not breaking holds when their opponent touches the ropes.
You don't see a lot of good heel work in WWE anymore.
Honestly, the last really good like technical heel in the ring that I can think of that like in the match would do stuff is Eddie Guerrero.
Yeah.
He was constantly gouging eyes, constantly doing chair work, constantly doing that kind of stuff.
MJF is good. He's up there, but when he wrestles, he's a good wrestler, so there's a little disconnect.
I mean, Eddie Guerrero was a great wrestler.
Yeah, but like you said, he did more of that stuff than even MJF does now.
Yeah, I mean,
he's more of a heel.
Honestly, it's the simplest thing in the world. Just gouge the eyes. Like, you just literally just... Anyways. Well, we touched on this one, but I'll review it. Hot tag.
Hot tag is... in a tag team match when the baby faces are getting beat down and the one in the ring is struggling and trying to reach his partner. Like you said, building up that tension. The crowd is building up.
Heel comes in, pulls him away.
Finally get that tag and the crowd pops.
And you almost always get it. If it's a good match, you almost always get a good pop. So next time you watch a tag team match and you see, you'll notice it. Once you see this stuff, you can't unsee it. What's a job?
A job is when a wrestler loses without much of offense.
Yeah.
They just
typically it's to lose.
Yeah.
You'd say I did a job, right? You'd say I did a job, which there's an opposite to that, which we'll get to later. But yeah, a job is basically when you lose. Okay, then what's a jobber?
A jobber is the loser, the one who again doesn't get much offense. Generally isn't really a known wrestler. And sometimes they don't even name the wrestler. They just lose.
When a guy like Seth Rollins loses, you wouldn't call him a jobber, though.
Right.
So this is a guy that consistently, kind of his job is to make the other guy look good.
And there are some famous jobbers who never win matches but are known for that status. Brooklyn Brawler.
Yep.
Barry Horowitz.
Yeah, and listen, it really shows you that you can lose in an interesting way, and you can win the crowd over, and you can get pops, and you can get heat, and it can be entertaining.
The guy with no chin, James Ellsworth.
Yeah.
That's how he got popular. He got beat up by Braun Strowman, and then he became a popular fan favorite.
It became pretty iconic. All right, let's go to the heart of it. What's kayfabe?
Something that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Kayfabe is suspending your disbelief. We all know that...
Today it is. Today it's suspending your disbelief.
We all know now that wrestling is scripted, but kayfabe was what the wrestlers did to make people believe it wasn't scripted, especially back in the day. Keeping kayfabe was the number one rule among wrestlers. You had to stay in character 24/7. The good guys could never travel in the same car with the bad guys. It just had to keep that story going, had to keep people's belief with kayfabe.
Yeah, the idea is that you present professional wrestling as being entirely legitimate and totally unscripted. And we can talk about several instances. Maybe we can do deep dives into them, but there have been several instances in which kayfabe has been famously broken, and that creates a lot of tension within the industry. Really, prior to, I don't know, the late 80s, basically, this was basically universally maintained across the industry. There's this idea that everybody relied on kayfabe to be successful.
There's that famous story from the late 80s, early 90s, John Stosselman. The reporter went and
John
did a
Stossel.
Stossel.
Yep.
Yeah. Did a report on wrestling, and was it Dr. Dave?
I always forget his last name.
They did a Dark Side of the Ring on it.
Yeah.
But he legitimately slapped Stossel across the face.
I think he ruptured his eardrum or something.
Yeah.
He did some serious damage to it
it's-
because he claimed wrestling was fake.
Right.
And that's not.
And that's how far they would go to keep kayfabe.
Yeah. These days it's a little different. The curtain's been pulled back.
Even Hulk Hogan choked out a
Yep.
What's the name? I can't think of his name. He was on a talk show. He choked out the host to prove that wrestling was real.
But if you think about Andy Kaufman, the work that he did with Jerry the King, that was all kayfabe inspired. It's kind of a play on fake. It's kind of a pig Latin version of fake to kind of
Carney.
keep it all straight. Yep, Carney language. All right, mark. What's a mark?
Well, we just said carny. Most of these terms go back to the carnival days of the late 19th century, early 20th century. So a mark was someone that con men would pick out as, someone they could get something from, they could take money, take advantage of. So in the wrestling business, a mark is a fan who, I don't know how to word it, I guess who gets into it a little too much, and the wrestlers will, I don't want to say take advantage of it, but
He kind of, it's a wrestling fan who either actually believes or enthusiastically behaves as though they believe that professional wrestling is not staged. And they kind of lose sight of that staged nature that's associated with the business, especially while supporting or hating on particular wrestlers. So it's something that it's an easy way to kind of get heat that isn't cheap if you come out and you say, I'm not going to humor all the marks in this crowd. Anybody that's in the industry knows that he's basically trying to put you down. He's trying to say that you guys are stupid, that you're idiots, that you aren't up to speed, and that you're enthusiastically supporting somebody just to be an idiot. You're not actually. So MJF likes to call people marks all the time. That's one of his favorite ones. Okay, what's a smark?
a smark is a smart mark.
Mm-hmm.
We're smarks.
We are
Anyone
smarks,
who looks into the behind the scenes stuff, anyone who gets so wrapped up into it, they know every detail about every wrestler and their mothers.
Yeah, you got to have inside knowledge of the industry, but you're not really speaking from your own. Like a guy like Kevin Nash can't be a smark.
No, because he's in
He
the
has
industry.
too much inside knowledge. He's inside. It has to be people on the outside of the industry that are reading the rumors, interpreting the information, talking to people on the streets, going to shows, watching things happen. That kind of peel the curtain back a little bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're smarks. What's it mean to sell something?
To sell something. You sell a move, you make the move look like it's real.
Exactly. So if I swing at you, even though I don't punch you in the face, you act like as though I punch you in the face. Or if I put you in a submission move, you act like it hurts, even though it really doesn't. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to act, and sometimes you catch a potato, and you don't have to act. So it's a way of kind of reacting to something to make it look legitimate. Sometimes you can oversell.
Mm-hmm.
What would be no selling?
No selling is shrugging off a move, immediately taking someone's finisher and then jumping up and acting like you're totally fine.
Yeah, today, I think, back in the day, no selling was a great way to kind of like build tension, get a good pop out of the crowd.
Hulk Hogan. Yeah.
Hulk Hogan, famous no seller. These days, with kayfabe being broken, no selling kind of pulls you out of kayfabe a little bit more.
Yeah, like I said earlier, kayfabe doesn't really exist anymore. You really have to suspend your disbelief of wrestling in order to enjoy it. And when somebody no-sells like that, it takes you right out of it.
Sometimes workers in the industry, too, will use no-selling to deal with backstage feuds in front of the camera. They'll no-sell somebody's move to try to make their brand look worse, kind of a thing.
Austin Aries and Impact Wrestling.
Yeah, I was going to say, you see that a lot more at the more indie-type promotions.
Yeah.
WWE, I don't think you would ever intentionally see that. What's a promo?
Promo is when a wrestler's talking on the mic.
Yeah, typically you have to be in character. It's an interview or a monologue. It can be in the ring, backstage, or even off-site. Sometimes it can be arranged around a skit or something that's happening. Mm-hmm. What's it called when you perform the promo? What's the word for that? Blanking a promo.
Cutting a promo.
Cutting a promo. Yeah, that's exactly what you say. Yeah, you cut a promo to say this. You might say if you're talking about someone in specifically, you might cut a promo that's on target right? You're picking a specific target, or you might just cut a promo to promote your own match that you've got coming up, or whatever, more
Working
generic
the
stuff.
stick.
Working the stick, right? The stick's the microphone.
Yep.
Tell me what a screw job is.
The Montreal screw job.
That is a famous one.
That is a famous one. Screw job is when a wrestler or multiple wrestlers think the match is ending one way, but legitimately the match goes a different way without their knowledge. Usually by, like in the Montreal screw jobs example, the boss changes the finish of the match without telling one of the wrestlers.
Yeah, so let's talk about what a work is right now, because it plays into this. What's a work?
A work is part of the storyline, something that's not real.
Right, a work is anything scripted.
Right.
Something that's predetermined. Okay, what is a shoot?
A shoot is legit. That's real. That's unscripted reality.
Okay, so a worked screw job
Is a storyline screw job where that was planned.
right? It's a scripted portion of the story in which there's a controversial finish, sometimes involving cheating, outside interference. Obviously, dusty finish would oftentimes fall under this category. However, a shoot screw job. What's a shoot screw job?
Is a legitimate screw job.
It's where it's unscripted, right? A shoot is anything that's unscripted. So you might say a shoot screw job, the famous Montreal screw job, it was supposed to go one way. The two wrestlers couldn't come to an agreement, so it goes the other way. And kind of a finish is forced. So anytime you might hear somebody say Hulk Hogan shoots on Eric Bischoff, he basically peels the curtain back, and typically the implication is that he's saying a whole bunch of unscripted bad stuff. Or, since how we're on the topic of shoots, the pipe bomb.
CM Punk pipe bomb. I thought we would get through a video without talking about CM Punk for once.
Too late. No.
Pipe bomb, using CM Punk as an example, he got on the mic and started cutting a promo with legitimate gripes,
He aired dirty laundry.
Yeah.
Is what it comes down to.
Right.
That's really what it is. So again, the idea is it's related to things being a shoot, because obviously no one wrote that for him, but that's what he wanted to do. All right, let's move on. Well, actually, let's touch on one more. Interesting. What's a swerve?
A swerve is, I think that's more towards the audience, when the audience thinks something's going to go one way and it out of nowhere goes a different way.
Yeah, it's a sudden change in the direction of the storyline, designed to specifically surprise the fans. So sometimes it involves a wrestler turning on a longtime ally. Let's talk about Marty Jannetty. Might be a good fit for that, right? Probably one of the most famous.
Through the barbershop window.
Yeah, it went right through the barbershop window with Shawn Michaels, famously broke up their popular tag team. That was a swerve, came out of nowhere, surprised everybody. That's really what a swerve is. It's a very quick change. So you might hear us reference like, oh man, I don't know how they're going to get out of this. They better swerve. That's really what we're referring to. What is strong style?
Strong style. Famous in Japan. It's a type of wrestling that, while still scripted, is very hard-hitting and looks legit.
Yeah, it
looks
tends
like
to be
real.
stiff, which is a word meaning that it just looks really harsh, and it tends to be more martial arts styled.
And in most cases, it is pretty legit. They're really making
they're pretty
contact
rough.
with those
Yeah,
shots.
in the USA, Shinsuke Nakamura is probably the most famous kind of strong style guy that's working in the business right now. What's a turn?
Turns when someone switches between babyface or heel.
Yeah, oftentimes Trish Stratus will turn on her.
She just turned.
Yeah, she
heel.
just turned heel. Or you might have someone turn face. Oftentimes, it's kind of hard to turn face unless you're kind of coming back from a break. It's kind of hard for a bad guy to just kind of become good, although you might see it on occasion.
The Big Show, Paul White, he's famous for
Back and forth and back and forth.
probably 2,000 different turns in his career.
Yeah, Vince McMahon
Some in
didn't
the
know what to
same
do with
night.
him. Yeah, Vince McMahon didn't know what to do with him. All right, so then related to that, what's a tweener?
Tweener would be someone that's in between babyface and heel. Someone that, like an anti-hero. Stone Cold Steve Austin was a famous tweener.
Undertaker.
Undertaker is a tweener, yep. Even more recently in NXT, Adam Cole for a long time was a tweener. He was supposed to be a heel, but he was getting cheered constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And a lot of guys are kind of too small and inconsequential to kind of justify. Like I'm thinking of like Chad Gable. Like he hasn't really gotten enough exposure.
Mhm.
Like he could be a face. You could really turn him into anything.
Right.
But he doesn't wrestle enough. He doesn't get enough exposure. Yeah, you look at the guy and he has a bright face gimmick, but he could go either way. He could gouge a guy's eye and be a heel like that. Like it really doesn't make a difference. Well, that is it. That's where we stand. How do you
Wow.
think you did?
other than that stable faction thing, I think I did pretty good.
Yeah, that was pretty darn good. You clearly know what you're talking about. Now we know why you're why we call you the professor. So, well, this one's gone on long enough. 35 terms, 35 minutes. So for that, we thank you. We hope that this is a little bit more informative. Hope that allows you to connect with us a little bit more. What's your favorite wrestling terminology? What one do you find yourself using? Sometimes I'll be sitting at work and talking to my boss, and I go, nah, it sounds like a work. I wouldn't believe that at all. And he kind of looks at me like he's fighting cocks to the side. Yeah, I don't think the guy's telling the truth. I think he's working us. I think this is all scripted. He knows what he's doing, and he's trying to screw us over. That's really what I'm trying to say. So which one do you find yourself using at work, if any? And if not, which one would you like to start using at work? That might be particularly interesting. So we hope this is informative. And hey, don't forget, like, comment, share, subscribe. Falls Count Anywhere. Check us out, Wrestling with the Business. Falls Count Anywhere comes out every Monday night. Wrestling with the Business, our main show with our 2 additional counterparts, comes out every Friday evening. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Check us out. You keep watching. We'll keep wrestling with the business. See you later.